from Bottomline.
Hello, and welcome to our International Women's Day episode of the Payments Podcast. I'm Jacqueline Powell, and I'm joined today by three of my esteemed colleagues at Bottomline. I'm happy to welcome Eva Aretakis, our Chief Technology Officer, Mandy Miller, our Chief Customer Officer, and Monica Kozak, our Chief Marketing Officer. Today's episode promises to be a lively conversation covering the challenges, the opportunities, and the successes that women leaders have in the financial services space and beyond. Today, March 8th, organizations all over the world will be celebrating Women's Day. Now, while messages may differ from organization to organization, they are underpinned by a common purpose, and that's to acknowledge and appreciate the role that women play in their families, their communities, and of course in business. From a messaging perspective, the International Women's Day organization urges us to understand, value, and inspire women's inclusion, as this leads to a better world. So before I start with introductions, it's worth sharing that according to Fortune magazine, only 22% of C-level positions are currently filled by women. Given a statistic like that, I'm especially proud to share that at Bottomline, 50% of our executive leadership team is female, which is certainly worth celebrating. Going a step further, according to AnitaB.org, which is a diversity-focused nonprofit organization, only 8% of chief technology officers in corporate America are indeed women. And one of those is our very own CTO. So let's jump right in by officially welcoming Eva Aretakis to the conversation. As CTO, Eve is in charge of the technology and operations organization, including global product development, data centers, and operations. Welcome, Eve.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you today.
Great to have you. So, Eve, you've held senior leadership positions at companies like Siemens, Unisphere, and ACI. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career journey and if mentors played a role in that journey?
Yes, of course. So I started as a software engineer and worked my way through various business level increases in terms of my roles and responsibilities, and moved between technology, business, and even did some time in sales. But I'd say mentorship was very interesting along my journey. I started with a company that was already highly global. And I think one of the things that I really valued was those that really helped me understand the global landscape in my mentoring. Someone I worked for many years ago once said to me, don't spend so much time worrying about the languages that your customers, your colleagues speak, but worry about understanding the culture and how you do business in various countries. And I think this helped me tremendously, not only as I worked in the international market, but even understanding your local markets that really understand the culture that motivates people to action, and understand the culture that your customers are in that may help you value the relationship as well as help you deliver ultimately good solutions and good support.
That's great. Thank you, Eve. Next, let's turn to you, Mandy. As our Chief Customer Officer, you're responsible for all our customer-facing functions, including implementations, customer support, and customer success, as well as serving as our Head of Transformation Office. Now, you've spent more than 25 years in the industry, including senior level positions at both ACI and First Data. And last, but most notably, and we're really chuffed about this, by the way, you were named one of American Banker's most influential women in payments for 2023. Welcome to the Payments Podcast.
Thank you, Jackie.
Mandy, can you give us a little background on your journey, and given your years of experience in the world of financial technology, share the most positive change that you have seen in terms of opportunity and successes for women in this field?
Sure. So I started in the payments industry back with First Data, and at the time I decided to go to school full-time and work full-time. And I had an opportunity working for First Data to get into technology. So it was on the other side of Y2K. and they were looking for programmers to help update the date field issues that sat out there. And so I passed the aptitude test and dove right into technology. And believe it or not, I was a COBOL JCL CICS programmer at that time. And I was in my very young 20s at the time. And you can imagine I was maybe one of two females, I think, in the organization that I worked in at the time. And I continued down that track for a few years. And at a very early age, I also got the chance to be a team leader. And that chance was given to me actually by a woman who ran our department. And I always think about the analogy where they say, reach down and help others up. And she certainly took a chance on me, given my age and experience. But I think that starts the history of where I've taken opportunities, even when it seems like a step too far to take sometimes to stretch your ability, but do it with confidence and with the help and support and mentorship of others. And I've had a couple of women in my journey who have been that rock of a mentor, and I've had a few men that have been that mentor for me as I've moved in my career. But just a couple other pivotal things I would say that I think back on my career, and then I'll reflect on how things have changed in the landscape potentially for women since those days. But I managed some development teams for a while, and then I had an opportunity to go do something different. And there were two opportunities that were presented to me. And one was around taking over a team that was pretty well oiled. And so you kind of just take the steering wheel and continue to guide them. And the other was leading a group called System Recovery, which was very high stress. We had made a code a customer perceptible issue, and my team would be responsible for cleaning that up, the customer communication, et cetera. And I had a male mentor at the time that told me, go where it's hot. That's where you're going to grow the most. And so I took that opportunity to go into system recovery, and ended up being one of my favorite jobs when I look back around my career, because it was so high pressure, high stress to get things done. But I worked with such talented people that had, a great mind and logic and figuring things out. And it was a really good growth opportunity for me. Not long after that, they asked me to take a role leaving the U.S. and go work out of First Data International, which the day I moved there to take the job was the first day I'd been outside the U.S. And so again, it was a very tall step to take, and to go where I didn't know anybody that I would be working with or for, and to have confidence that I could do that with the help and support of the mentors around me. And again, huge learning opportunity to work for a U.S. company outside of the U.S. It gives you a lot of the learnings on sensitivity to cultures, and just even simple things about when you schedule meetings. Now, I think of that often as I sit in the U.S. and work with my colleagues overseas. But from then, one of my key mentors had left the company and went to work for ACI, and he brought me over to ACI with, again, another stretch assignment of setting up some of the global sites in Romania and Ireland, and things I hadn't done before. But he had, great confidence in me, sometimes even more than I had in myself. And I think about that often. He passed away last year, and he'll always be somebody that I think about that changed my career trajectory just by believing in me. So, I think about that a lot in what I do now, and go where it's hot. That's where you grow the most. That's where you can apply your strengths and things that you've learned over time. But if you think about, I talked about being in payments and technology, and those were the mid to late 90s in those early days. And I think the great thing about payments is that right around that time, I think more women were going in that field, especially banking and things like that. And now you go to women's networking groups, and we've got several, whether they be through, as you mentioned, American Banker or Women in Payments. There are some women that have been in this field for decades. And I do see those women as the ones who have reached down and pulled the rest up and offered networking and mentorship and training on payments in the industry. And so we do see a history of women being in leadership roles in this space generally. Is it still heavily more weighted towards men? Yes, there is, but there are always the women that you can see yourself in different positions, whether it be technology. Monica is going to talk about marketing here in a bit. The customer side, the sales side, there's definitely women mentors out there that can offer a career path and help to others. So obviously, I think the other things that have changed just generally in the world is, more companies trying to have boards that are made up of diversity and reserving spots for women or other cultures to be present in the board for diversification of thought and certainly in the executive teams. So I think lots of change paved the way. Payments is lucky that women were, getting in at the very beginning and now have been there through the journey of the changes that we've seen in payments.
Great reflections. Thank you, Mandy. And now I'm happy to welcome Monica Kozak, our CMO at Bottomline. Monica, you're a fintech and payments veteran as well, with executive leadership positions at Fiserv and Bank of America Merchant Services. But you've also spent a decade leading strategy on the agency side. Now, I'm sure that over the years, you have seen strides in diversity and inclusivity in the workplace, but were there any pivotal moments or perhaps decisions in your career that you believe have significantly contributed to your success?
Jackie, I have lots of moments, but in particular, I always think back to the beginning of my career, which was when I was doing PR and media work in professional baseball, which at the time was not inherently female friendly. And I distinctly recall a moment where I needed to interview a player following a game in the locker room. And in my market at that time, that was not something that was done. And I stood outside the locker room and I had this moment of awareness that on that night I was not going to be able to successfully do my job. There was a barrier to me doing the job that I was there to do. And it was going to be handed over to someone else, someone who wasn't a woman. Things were different back then, and to your point, there have been great strides made in equity and inclusion and diversity, but at that moment, on that night, in my early 20s, I was standing there facing the fact that I was not going to be able to do what I was there to do. And I realized that I didn't want that to be my reality. I didn't want that to be what was something that I was faced with on a regular basis. And I knew that I had to find a place and a space for me that allowed for great opportunity and a seat at the table. And that's always been extremely important to me, that I always had the opportunity to get to a place where what I knew, what I could contribute was valued and meaningful. And along the lines of people that are important in that journey, I've had lots of really intentional interactions with mentors who recognized that I had so much that I could contribute, but I needed help filling in some of the blanks. And I think that's a really important point, that our relationships that we have with people in our career path can really be valuable if we recognize how they can contribute to the moments that we're in. How can they help us find our place at that table? And for me, being in marketing, which is a function that always requires use of budget and oftentimes lots and lots of budget, having relationships with finance partners who helped me create the necessary business cases behind the very large asks for budget that I was after was exceptionally meaningful. That intersection of finance and marketing is something that when I first started out my career, I wasn't as aware of as I, of course, am now. And so having mentors that really poked a lot of holes in my business cases and showed me all the ways that I was not on a track to get the dollars that I needed and how to really speak a different language. I was a young marketer who needed to speak a completely different language. And so leaning on mentors that were not in marketing, that didn't know anything about marketing, but knew a lot about finance, that knew a lot about fraud, risk, all of the things that I needed to be aware of was critically important in me being able to create the pathway to get to that seat at the table. Because in marketing, you have dependencies on all these other things. Recognizing those dependencies and finding the relationships that help you build your skill set in the area that you're focused on is really one of the things that I have understood and learned and still reach out for help with as I've evolved in my career.
Thanks, Monica. Eve, along the lines of pivotal moments, can you tell us about a leadership position you've learned that's unique to your experience as a woman in the workplace?
Yes, I think there's been quite a few that have influenced me, but one that really stands out is, as somebody that grew up in technology, I also commented that I've done some other business stints and even in sales. And doing my time in sales was really a humbling experience. One that you really learned how to support your sales colleagues and learned how difficult a challenge it is for sales to handle a customer, to handle product objections, to handle competitive landscapes, to be able to address and pivot on specific needs that are driven by the business continuity of our customer base. So to me, this was a huge experience in my own personal growth and really bring back into the technology groups how we can help our sales colleagues to be sure that we can enable them with the value propositions of our portfolio, as well as, very importantly, help our customers and understand what pain points we need to help them solve, as well as deliver on.
Eve, when it comes to investing in women, how do you think that needs to happen? What does that look like from your technology-oriented point of view?
So it's really interesting to see how women have progressed. And I mean, first, in a lot of the business functions, I'd say slower in the technology area, but you see a huge growth happening. And I think we can all do our part. I mean, there's some great programs like Girls for Coding that have really promoted the idea of women in computer science-led degrees to help develop engineering capacity. Other areas that I've seen great opportunities in data science. You see a number of women coming through the ranks on data science. So how can we help each other? I think the promotion of women through industry forums, through local corporate functions, is a great way to share ideas, to also share some of the struggles, whether it's work-life balance or whether it's just breaking through some of the networking that's happened traditionally with men in high-tech industries. But I see some great movements of women, and I see women as able to really develop some new ideas in how they look at problems, how they address challenges, and how we can really focus on the customer. I mean, ultimately, women are great solution-oriented people, and bringing solution orientation to customer problems is really a recipe for success.
That's insightful. Thanks, Eve. Monica, how about a lesson from you?
Oh boy, I can. I could tell a lot of them, but I'll try to stick to one or two. But there's one in particular that people that know me well have heard me speak about often. And it's one that really shaped the leader that I have become. And I had somebody in my family pass away on a Tuesday. And the reason that I know it was a Tuesday is because I got a call from my manager who said, "Is this dying thing going to get in the way of a deadline we have for you on Thursday?" And I said, "No, it won't. Nope. I will do what you need me to do for Thursday." And looking back to that many, many year younger self, that wasn't the right answer, of course. It was, you shouldn't be asking me this question. But what it did do was show me the kind of leader that I didn't ever want to be. It showed me that if you bring your best self, if you're able to be your best self in your life, you'll be your best self at work. You'll be your best self at your desk. And so I think that it's tough to be a woman because it's tough to be anybody, but especially being a woman, you have an inherent need or thought that you need to be everything to everyone. You have responsibilities. There are expectations that you often are the caregiver of everybody, from the pets to the parents to the kids to the neighbors to the carpool. You're supposed to find a way to do it all. And that's really challenging. And I think that if we can be leaders that recognize that there is a way to show grace and to allow space for people to balance their lives and their work, we don't get 100% out of people, we get 110% out of people. And so having that moment happen all those years ago, I actually wouldn't trade it because it showed me the value in saying to the people that work for and with you, I see you. I know that you have lots of things that you're juggling. And if I allow all of this to work in harmony, we'll be our best selves together. And that's been a really valuable lesson to me.
Eve, when it comes to investing in women, how do you think that needs to happen? What does that look like from your technology-oriented point of view?
So it's really interesting to see how women have progressed. And I mean, first, in a lot of the business functions, I'd say slower in the technology area, but you see a huge growth happening. And I think we can all do our part. I mean, there's some great programs like Girls for Coding that have really promoted the idea of women in computer science-led degrees to help develop engineering capacity. Other areas that I've seen great opportunities in data science. You see a number of women coming through the ranks on data science. So how can we help each other? I think the promotion of women through industry forums, through local corporate functions, is a great way to share ideas, to also share some of the struggles, whether it's work-life balance or whether it's just breaking through some of the networking that's happened traditionally with men in high-tech industries. But I see some great movements of women, and I see women as able to really develop some new ideas in how they look at problems, how they address challenges, and how we can really focus on the customer. I mean, ultimately, women are great solution-oriented people, and bringing solution orientation to customer problems is really a recipe for success.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Mandy, from a customer success perspective, what do you believe the benefits are of having women in leadership roles?
So I think, Jackie, I would say it's around diversity and diversification of thought first and foremost. And I think, just a different mix of people will bring different ideas, different solutions, different ways of approaching issues to the table. And so, having diversification, whether it be by gender, by background and ethnicity, by culture, I think just adds value to the way that we go about solving issues and interacting with each other. But from a customer success perspective, customers also want to deal with companies that mirror them somewhat, right? And I think it's very rare you would find anybody now that has all men or all women in any situation that you're working through a project or an ongoing platform support for. So I think it just opens people's mind on the ways to interact and to be approach things professionally, approach things knowing that you're going to have diversification of thought. It won't be a single way of going about anything. So I think all those things really bring value to the interactions and the outcomes. And ultimately, it really is about thinking things through from each other's shoes. And you think about, we have customers, they have customers. And then in fintech or financial services, we may be dealing with a bank, but their end users are corporates or, of all shapes and sizes of companies and people. And the more that we can mirror our customers and their end users, it helps us think things from different perspectives and come out with the best possible solutions.
That's great. Thank you. Now, ladies, I'd like to switch to some of the thinking, the strategic approaches and achievements that you have seen in your current roles. Monica, what do you consider your most important achievements so far during your time at Bottomline?
It's been my absolute honor to be overseeing our brand unification journey. Our company has, for closing on 35 years, been a collection of product brands rather than a master brand. And bringing all of this into focus under a unified brand is really challenging, but creating a global capabilities mindset is exactly what we need to continue to evolve and move us forward as our solutions cross borders, cross needs. And so that has really been a proud moment. We're just beginning the journey. This is something that we've just started. But I think I'm also really proud of everyone's involvement and the excitement that we share together in knowing that creating this one unified Bottomline brand will succeed and create space for this brand in the market that we hadn't imagined before. And so I'm really proud of the journey that we're beginning together.
And exciting times they are. Mandy, at Bottomline, we're all about the customer. What are some of the key factors in achieving success for you and your team?
Thanks, Jackie. Well, just adding off to what Monica said, just the work that Monica and team are doing around brand unification is so important because we have customers that have known us from one angle or another and haven't recognized all of the value that we can bring to them. And so Monica's team is giving us this great air cover and the story about Bottomline that we want to bring to each and every customer so that we, maximize what we can do for them. It's always easier to deal with fewer numbers of vendors in a space than to have, too many. And we want to be more to each of our customers than we are today. But I think, as we represent the customer in our group, it's all about finding win-win scenarios. And by that, that means that we've got to clearly understand what the strategy is of Bottomline and what we're focusing on, the value we can bring to customers. Then we need to understand very clearly their objectives and how do we think about our solutions fitting in and driving value on their side. We've got great partners across functions that are responsible for things like product and sales and technology and Monica and marketing, for example. Once a deal is signed, it gets handed off to my group and we become the steward of that relationship. So everything from implementing or onboarding the customers onto our solutions to supporting them ongoing and making sure that any support questions or follow-up services items are handled swiftly. And it's also about making sure there's an equal commercial exchange. It's hard to always understand the value of the solutions that we provide, but we're working very hard with our internal teams on putting the solution outcomes into financial outcomes and understanding what they add to in our customers' environment. And so we also seek to ensure that we've got a fair commercial exchange so we can continue to feed dollars back into product and other parts of our organization to drive continuous development and enhancements in what we provide to our customers. So I think it's all about win-win. We also need to be the steward of or the voice of our customer to shape things like value propositions. Our product does a great job of understanding industry. Our team is very instrumental in bringing the customer experience back into those types of deliverables and making them real, giving them practical application. Things like customer forums and how we get the voice of customers into roadmap developments how we create a consistent experience. All of those things my team is working on. And I think when we get customers that are singing our praises, and it's not for giving away software, giving away dollars, but really about adding value to their company and being responsive and being a great partner, that's when we truly believe we've achieved success.
Over to you, Eve. There have been many technology changes in the payments business during your tenure. What would you say have been your biggest challenges so far, and how did you and your team solve them?
So obviously in technology, there are always challenges. I'd say one of the most interesting dynamics we've seen is what happened with COVID. We became a remote workforce. Our customers became a remote workforce, and really challenging us to use technology to solve for issues that you normally could solve by creating collaboration in an office environment. So I think from that perspective, it changed the way we operated, but it also drove and pivoted on something that I think was very important to payments, which was frictionless user experience, because the customer, the end customer, really expected things to be seamless. And I think as we learned how seamless needed to work for us and our experience between our operating mode and with our customers, we also understood better what frictionless meant to the end customer that our customers were servicing. So I think threading the needle, it provided a lot of opportunity for us to exploit that and leverage it both for the workplace as well as for the customer value propositions.
That's insightful. Thank you. Okay, so my last question is a two-parter. Firstly, what advice would you give to young women aspiring leadership roles in fintech or tech industries? And can you share a habit or perhaps a practice that's been critical to you in your personal and professional growth? Eve, let's start with you.
Great. So I think one piece of advice I'd give to young women that are entering fintech, the payment industry, or high tech in general is don't think of yourself in a certain function exclusively. Part of being well-rounded and really gaining the aspects is to understand what all your partners face in terms of their challenges. So one of the things that I thought was really very helpful for my career is spending some time in sales and product management besides where I grew up in technology. I ended back up in technology, but it was really a big learning for me to do that. The second thing I would say in terms of a piece of advice or something that I follow is that, it's amazing how small the world is, and stay in touch with people that you've met along the way. So I always work every week to reach out to 2 people that I haven't spoken to in a long time. What's surprising to me is the number of people that they tend to reach out when they need something. And I think it's just much better to keep in touch with your wide network and let that network develop, as well as be something that you can rely on as time goes on, whether that's in a recruiting aspect or whether that's in a referral aspect or whether that's just in terms of getting new information about how something might be changing. So keep in touch.
That's a fabulous habit to adopt. Thank you. And Mandy, how about you?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier there was this mantra that I had from an early mentor about going where it's hot. And that usually means you're taking on a role that has something chaotic about it or undefined or needs fixed. But those tend to be the places that give you the most growth potential for yourself and others around you and the company. And I would say to take advantage of the journey when you're in those positions. It's really easy to get frustrated, to feel overwhelmed, to feel like the priority list is ever growing. But I think I've approached all the jobs I've had almost as thinking of my job is case studies. Every day you go to work, you've got problems in front of you to solve. We have lots of resources when we think of the people around us. We need to lean on them more and not try to go it alone all the time. It's not about what you can do individually as you grow in the leadership ranks, but how do you leverage and harness the diversification of thought of those around you and push for best outcomes. So, take it as a journey. Try to not get overwhelmed by the pressures of it, but just enjoy it and enjoy the learning. I think the other thing that I've learned throughout the years too is and I had this discussion with one leader on this concept of fairness, what's fair? And there's really no yardstick on fairness. Fairness is just how you perceive your reality, but there's no yardstick on it. So you kind of have to put that aside and focus on the task at hand and how well that you can deliver on it, how well you can get your team to perform, and not get caught up on comparing, yourself or your career to others, because there really is no yardstick for that. For habits or practices that I think have served me well, or things that I've had to learn along the way, I mentioned one of them, which is leaning on your colleagues, allow participation from your peers and your team. I think early on in careers, you think that you're trying to prove yourself and you're taking a lot of the work on individually, but that's not where you find the best outcomes or those that people naturally will follow into. So remember to lean on your colleagues. I think depersonalize matters as much as you can. So that controls the emotion. Get back to understanding the plan, the task, where there's misalignment, where there's disagreement, and work the plan versus working it as a personal matter. Sometimes I wish I'd take my own advice more so there. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. And then balancing personal and professional life, but understand there's periods of time in your career where you're going to need to put more than 100% in. I had an exchange with a woman the other day. I was on vacation and met her, and she is of the millennial generation, and we were talking about companies and loyalty, and she said that she said, my generation recognizes that you're just a number to most companies, and therefore, we're less likely to put extra in, because at the end of the day, we're just a number. We're here to do the job, and companies should be careful about asking for too much more. And my feedback to her was, that's fine, and sometimes that's adequate to maintain the role that you've been brought in to do. But if you're looking for opportunities to advance, you still need to show that, that willingness to do more than what you've done today, to learn and grow and to get yourself known, especially with working from home. It's a whole different dynamic now to establish that, you're looking for the next opportunity to move up, to earn more, to have more responsibility. And so again, I think balancing personal and professional life is super important to your health. I also think when you've got your sights set on the next objective, you do have to be willing to, put more in to achieve the things that you want, and not just assume that, that it's going to be handed to you. So that'd be my 2 cents.
That's good advice. Thank you. Monica, perhaps you could share a few closing thoughts. What's your advice to someone coming up in the marketing ranks? Why is building a personal brand, especially for women, so very important?
Well, I have to say first that I've taken some notes from what Mandy just said, in particular around depersonalizing, because I think that is really hard to do and very necessary. And so Mandy said she struggles with it. I think we all probably struggle with it at times, right? But I think that we should strive to remember that sometimes we are adding our own narrative in that really isn't there. So I'm going to work on that as well. Personal brand is so important to me. I said earlier that I think as women in particular, we try to be all of the things to everybody. It comes with the territory, but it's also critical that when it comes to work, we draw some lines around who we not only want to be, but how we want to be seen and what matters to us. And actually, that echoes back to what Mandy just said. You can do the minimum. You can do what's required of you to do the job that you were hired to do. But if you want more, if you aspire to something different or bigger, then how people see you, how you are perceived, it matters. And so you need to recognize that your brand needs to align with your expectations of what you hope to achieve. Because if you want to be somebody that is viewed as a potential leader, someone who can manage a team, then you have to be able to see that you do put in extra when extra is needed, or that you do know how to balance and prioritize. And especially when it comes to our brand precedes us when we join a call. People look and they say, "Oh, who's on this call?" And we form opinions based on the interactions that we've had with people, and our brand stays behind when we walk out of the room. And I think that it's critically important that we recognize that we leave our stamp on the spaces that we occupy. And so creating the perception about who we are and what we bring to each of those interactions, it needs to be intentional. And I think that that's the key piece, is that we, in the same way we decide what clothes we're going to wear and what cars we drive and all of the things that create a version, a narrative of who we are, the same is true at work. It's true all the places and spaces that we occupy. And so when it comes to our careers, when it comes to how we show up, it's my advice to be intentional, to decide how you want to be perceived. What do you want people to think of you? I figured out for myself a long time ago that part of who I am, part of my brand, especially in marketing, is that my answer is always, "we'll find a way." I may be screaming no on the inside, but I know that I can find a way. It may take longer than someone would like. It may be harder than I would like, but I can always find a way. I have to get creative. I have to lean on people, like Mandy said. But that's a really big part of what I want people to see when they think of me, is she'll find a way. She'll figure it out. If we need something done, she'll get us there. So just being intentional is really meaningful when you're creating your brand, and your brand will help guide you, and you can be proud of it.
I love that. Thank you. With that, it's a wrap for our special International Women's Day podcast. Great thanks to my colleagues from Bottomline, our Chief Technology Officer, Eva Aretakis, our Chief Customer Officer, Mandy Miller, and our Chief Marketing Officer, Monica Kozak. Once again, I'm Jacqueline Powell. Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Payments Podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple, and SoundCloud. Until next time.
The Payments Podcast from Bottomline.